Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cybersecurity Recruiter podcast. Today I'm joined by James Leach. How you doing, my friend?
Thanks for having me on.
Good. Yeah, nice to see you. I remember when we were planning for this show, I think you're one of the first guests I've had, James, that probably talks as much as a recruiter does. So it was a nice conversation.
You can tell I naturally fell into sales roles as my ability to communicate. So there you go. I guess you got to highlight your skills where you can.
Definitely. But for the listeners that don't know who you are, James, I'm just going to do you a bit of an intro. If I get anything wrong, feel free to correct me, shout at me after. But started off as an engineer and fairly quickly transitioned to a senior security engineer, then progressed to EMSEC into a project management position, and then spent considerable time at Veris Group and Coalfire. Progressed very nicely there. Again, from project manager up to director level, all the way up to vice president level. You were there for about 8 years, then moved on to a VP position over at Coalfire, did some freelancing, and you are now the co-founder and managing principal. Welcome to the show.
Perfect. That's a good rundown. Being in the cybersecurity realm, you're a melting pot of experience. And I started out early stage of my career around the network engineering. I had a lot of different experiences working at operations center, building networks, systems administration, and then eventually shifting over to the security side where I found my sweet spot. I've served in a lot of different roles since then, both on the tactical side, but also on the strategic side, hand delivering, hand jamming, up to leading big enterprise accounts. But one element that hadn't changed for a lot of my career is the desire to do something on my own. So that's why I'm here today. I feel there's a lot of people in the world that have an interest, or the concept of entrepreneurship is really exciting. There's the good side and the bad side and everything in between. I was that kid who had a landscaping hustle when I was young, always wanted to do something. Felt like that fostered in me over the years, and eventually decided to break out on my own with Fortreum with Michael Carter about 5 years ago.
Yeah, cool. Has it been a fun 5 years so far? Stress-free?
Yes, couple living in its finest. To add to the mix, we decided to bootstrap the company. That's certainly a path that is less traveled. We've learned a lot, had to be real smart with our time and make some good decisions to survive the gauntlet.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting times and interesting market conditions. I think we'll look back at these times as some of the most interesting times perhaps ever. Nothing's normal anymore, mate. It's just all wild.
If it's not a technology disruption, there's policy disruption. And ultimately, you have to find your way. Regardless if you're contributing or running your own shop, we are in an active changing world. It's important to stay connected.
Yeah, we are. But look, I know I've done you a bit of an intro, James, but I'll start where I always start, which is what's a day in the life like right now? What do you get up to, and what's going on in the world of James?
So let me cover Fortreum and who we are real quick. We are an independent advisory, assessment, and technical testing firm. We focus 100% on cybersecurity. We do a lot of work in the regulated industry space in terms of helping customers navigate regulatory requirements. For example, if you're a software company and you're looking to sell into the healthcare vertical or public sector, we have capability to support you through the journey, whether we're on the advisory side or the assessment. The technical testing element is the verification piece of the business. It's where we have a lot of our labs team. They do a lot of penetration testing, red teaming, to help verify that the insane amount of money you spent on technology actually works. That's what we do in a nutshell.
Cool, my friend. Starting out on your own, James, it's often glamorized being an entrepreneur. I know firsthand how stressful it is, and the highs are pretty high and the lows can be pretty low. Any advice for people out there, if people are listening that have heads of, or maybe they're in that entrepreneurial journey themselves? Is there anything you know now that you wish you knew a few years back?
You've got to find that passion and that fire within you to endure a lot of ups and downs. Grit is a big factor in how well you do in terms of success in the marketplace. Tied into that is the passion element. If you're passionate about money, but not passionate about what you do, there's a major disconnect. The money element will fade quickly. You have to be passionate in the mission or what you're doing, the problems you're solving, and who you're helping. Money is a follow-on to doing business, but it can't be the only reason. Especially in the bootstrap world, you will run out of steam pretty quickly. For whatever reason, I had an insane passion for compliance and security and the intersect of the two. It hasn't left a good 20 to 25 years of doing this type of work. I've had the fortune of working at different companies where I've taken the best of what I've learned previously to build something new. And it's based off the mission, the core values of our company and stuff. So I think it goes a long way when people understand why you're in business. Certainly, it can't just be for the money. It's got to be for the mission.
Yeah, definitely, my friend. And I think as well, like you say, when you're bootstrapping, it's nice to have that control. I think you used the word grit, but yeah, you've certainly got to have some grit. Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. And all right, James, the leap from going from employee to employer, was that as scary as it looked? How did you find that? Was that quite a big transition?
Yeah, it was, because it's easy to take the safe route in the scope of life. I'm a father of 3 daughters, and when you have other mouths to feed besides if you have a significant other, which I did at the time, but of course I had 3 daughters, you feel like you're putting a lot on the table. In today's economy, you can be an employee and be just as vulnerable as an employer, depending on how the market shifts are. In some regard, everybody's at risk or needs to be aware of some where things are trending. But ultimately, it was one of those things where I didn't want to look back and have regrets about what I didn't try. Rule number 1, you can't be afraid to fail. There's 2 scenarios here. Either you win or you learn. You don't lose. You have to fail fast to pick yourself up and keep moving. There's risk in entrepreneurship. There's risk when you have a family. The timing of when you start things can vary. Maybe sooner is better. I'd also say that, kind of looking back, I was able to experience a lot of early stage leadership roles to understand how to grow a business and learn from my leadership, my mentors, to help me be prepared for this journey. While I would typically say, earlier is better before your life gets more complicated, you also have to take a look at what problem you're trying to solve, and do you believe you can do it with this level of experience? If you don't have it, I would say one of the big things of being a founder of any business is being self-aware. Self-aware of your strengths and very self-aware of your weaknesses, because you have to be very quick. You check your ego at the door and acknowledge that there's just certain things you're not good at. In the beginning, you don't really have the luxury of kind of turning things off and on. You have to do everything. But as you start to grow, you need to be very quick to recognize where you need people that are better than you at something in there to help you grow as a company. When you figure that out and check your ego at the door, bring in smarter people than yourself to take that role on versus you trying to do everything. You can't do everything well. So from a multitasking standpoint, your job is to delegate as quickly as possible as you scale, and check your ego. Bring in smart people and get out of their way.
Yeah, I like that, James, because I've seen that a lot in recruitment over the years, where people do have a bit of an ego and they're pretty good at recruitment, and it actually prevents them from growing because, like you say, you've got your ego there, you're pretty good, and you probably keep your hand on things a bit too much. And it's got its advantages. You can maybe play it a bit safer, but I can see why it does prevent the business from expanding as well.
Like, even if you can do it well, you have a finite amount of time and capacity. You have to recognize when capacity is getting to the point where even if you could do well, it's time to bring partners in. I would say partner everything. When you're starting off, you need partners. When you get to mid-stage, you need partners. As you grow bigger, you need partners. That doesn't change. Knowing that you can count on a few versus the volume. I would say that one of our successes has been an ability to hyper-focus on partners that can mutually benefit. Because what is a partnership if you're not mutually benefiting? It's important that you can find some companies that you can grow with and tackle some of the bigger guys in the process.
Cool. I like that, James. I really like that, as well as what you said a minute ago. You either win or you learn. It's a nice attitude to have.
And I'm not going to say that there are times where I either win or I learn or I get my butt kicked and get sent back home for the weekend or reset. I come back on Monday, but you have to pick yourself up. It's that relentless pursuit of bringing your A game. It's not real different in terms of a job or a career, you want to do your best, right? Sometimes it doesn't work out and you've got to navigate through some complex challenges. Sometimes you don't excel at the level you want, and you got to keep redirecting it until you find a way forward. That's definitely something that I've grown in, where it takes time to build up that kind of resilience.
It's just nice to hear someone at your level talking about that. I've had it so many times where I'm like, I've completely cracked this. This is great. Nothing's ever going to go wrong again. And then life smacks you in the face and humbles you massively. So it's nice to hear other people say it. I've had it myself where it's absolutely cracked this, got it. Nothing will go wrong again. And then guess what it does? You quickly get reminded that, got a bit of work to do still.
Yeah. And another thing I wanted to talk about was just, it's easy to be driven to the point where, you're always looking at the destination and not the journey. And the small wins can grow into the big wins. And it's important that you kick back with your team and your leadership and in those moments when you've had a success, not to the point of the ego getting too big, but enough to where it's not always about the next thing and the destination. It's about the journey, right? And that's what makes this sustainable. To do that, you're going to miss out on a lot.
I've heard that a lot of successful people struggle to do that, and you have to remind yourself, if you don't celebrate the wins, you don't give your brain the appropriate rewards it needs, it can become less motivated. What you've said is right, important. You need to celebrate those successes to reward the brain.
Yeah, that's correct. And times where we celebrate too much, we get leveled. So we've had to balance that out. I feel like we've got that down now. We're a hybrid remote company. So while we're based in the DC metro area, Virginia, Maryland, DC, half our staff live in the DC metro. We also have staff in about 25 other states. One of the challenges that we have is around culture being a really big deal for us as a company. In the services business, tech, you got to work hard at it. You definitely have to work hard to keep that culture alive and make sure that you're doing things to make people feel connected and heard.
Yeah, I think as well, especially with hybrid, you're probably easier to stay a bit more connected. But yeah, I think especially in a remote environment, you've got to be quite intentional about that, haven't you? Because it's not like the days where you go for a beer after work or you have that water cooler chat. Those days are to some extent gone. So it's like you've got to be pretty deliberate about those things these days, haven't you?
You really do. And we go out and visit team members as much as they come in and visit us. So I think it's a good balance where we have concentrations of employees. We'll go out and meet with employees and customers and prospects. We call it a city summit. We accomplish all three when we're out in the field. And we're very intentional about meeting with our employees first, and certainly customers and prospects. We get to do all the above in some sort of like hybrid fashion. So that works pretty well. And then we'll have staff come through, leadership and other individuals that have started but haven't been able to meet the collective team. We'll rotate them through the mothership or HQ and Lansdowne we'll do more planned type events, but seems to work out pretty good. And we're always in the surveys out to make sure that people agree with that. It's one thing to do it a few times, but are you consistent with it? So that's something we're always working on. We're not perfect, but we try to keep that connection. For folks out there that are running remote or hybrid businesses, it's something you can't let down on. It's really important that you make a concerted effort to stay connected, because if you don't, you're just like any other company. And if you don't have that connection, people are more likely to make a change. In cyberspace, it's pretty easy to make a change in certain skill sets if you're not careful.
Yeah. And I think people are going back to more long-term is, but that job for life thing, that's obviously gone a long time ago, James, hasn't it? I don't know if it's since kind of the remote thing where changes have become a bit easier to make. But yeah, I think people do want to be settled for a certain length of time, but you've got to be aware of it and look at what retains people and get the balance right, I think, on that front, haven't you? It's worth keeping front of mind.
That's right.
You mentioned as well how it's quite crazy to be a founder and stuff like that, but you're right, even for an employee, it must be the most uncertain a lot of people have ever felt. Nothing's normal anymore. I was thinking the other day, I wish I could have a little bit of certainty on what was going to happen in 6 or 12 months. I just can't see. I can't visualize what's going to happen. I just find it impossible.
What's interesting is one of the resource shifts we've seen. We work with a lot of big technology companies. It's always deemed the safe place to go in terms of company risk historically. when a lot of these bigger companies were going through layoffs and reductions, like reset the clock on what was considered safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like it's actually the silver lining for disruption is because we're hybrid remote, we offer a unique opportunity to continue on in a similar space, but to do it at your geographic location. We are not hard set on you have to be at this office X amount of time. The RTO thing hasn't stuck with us. You look at the core values of what we do. I can go through those real quick. I'll talk to your job. It's always been the way that I've appreciated the best jobs I've had at different companies gave me autonomy, right? The quality of the work is foundational for any entrepreneur out there. Quality has to be number one, and that's how word of mouth and grassroots type of referrals come from high quality service. And then being customer focused, that has to drive less about competitor focus, but customer focus, right? What problems you're solving and how can you do things better? And then the accountability that kind of wraps this together. We're a project-based type environment where we hired you to do your job. You need to have personal accountability to do the right thing. We wrap those things together. The model that we have, we do make mistakes in the hiring front here and there, but in general, that's the type of people that we're looking for. And I think that's just a general rule of thumb. If you're looking for remote people, they need to be personally accountable. They need to have autonomy to do their job. And I think the outcomes are far greater than, pushing to have people come to said location. So that's what we've adopted, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah, cool. I think you're absolutely spot on as well about the smaller firms. I had it fairly recently where one of the companies I was recruiting for was a smaller company. A candidate referenced the fact that he was a little bit worried about joining a smaller company in like uncertain times. And with you, James, I was like, whoa, hang on a second. Because I gave it a real life example of during COVID, all the big recruitment companies laid off, and a lot of the smaller ones where you knew the founder, there was a bit more of a like intimate personal connection, and the culture was perhaps a bit better because the company's smaller. Those companies stood strong and didn't lay off. I think it's completely flipped. A smaller company is way more secure than a big tech company that could do anything at any moment, regardless of their financials look like or how much money they're making. If something new piece of tech comes in, they don't think twice about getting some quite heavy cuts.
Yeah, and shareholder driven, different perspective altogether, right? Versus the way companies start out. I'm appreciative that we're in the position where we can make standalone decisions.
Yeah.
Why did we start the company? We did it because we wanted to build a culture that promoted some of the values I was talking about. That's something we live and die by. You don't always see that in the corporate world, and we're doing our best to treat employees and customers the same way we like to be treated.
What's planned for the future then, James? What's next on the horizon for the business? Have you got projections for this year?
Exciting thing for us, we've been working on our platform. The problem we're trying to solve is from a governance standpoint, a lot of organizations, software providers that are selling to different industries have a lot of regulated requirements to meet. 6 to 11 is on average. So trying to find a way to integrate those into a normalized fashion and do more continuous instead of point-in-time assessments. We've been doing a lot of beta testing over the past 2 years, and we're rolling this out at scale. And we do believe it's in line with industry in terms of where everything's shifting towards automation. We believe to be positioned well in that. Just this past week, we got our ISO certification, and then also we got our CMMC C3PA. It's taken 12 to 18 months to get both of those, but somehow it's like that we'll celebrate the win on that. And we're just trying to be more of a one-stop shop for, software companies that are looking for I wouldn't say an easy button, but just looking for an easier way to outsource that part of their business as much as possible. I can relate to this a lot in our business, things that are not core to your business, like we're proponents of outsourcing, right? They focused on their core business and what you do great, and where you can bring in partners to help you take the shackles off a little bit. I think that's always a good thing to consider.
You've had a busy week, so you've done RSA, got ISO certified, and sorted with CMMC.
It's been a real busy week, but those were 18 months for ISO. It took us a long time to get there, but I'm proud of hitting that journey. We're actually putting out a bunch of press releases this week, so before it's hit the wire. So that's exciting.
James. For people listening, I know you mentioned hiring a minute ago. For people listening that would potentially want to join you and who are on the market, what sort of things do you look for? Is there any do's and don'ts? Is there anything that you particularly love or particularly don't like that could help the listeners that are out there looking for new positions?
Depending on what stage you're in, if you're early stage, let's just say you're a junior in college and looking at your senior year, and hopefully you're looking at internships. One of the things that really stands out to me on the more junior level cyber front is the intangibles around being proactive. You have your curriculum to get your degree, but if you know that the technology space is really interesting to you and that's the space you want to go in, maybe looking at getting a cyber-centric type degree, information assurance. One of the things that I look at that tends to carry well is the initiative taken outside of school. I'm not saying that certifications are the be-all end-all, but it shows initiative and grit. Right. So if somebody goes and gets their, let's just say it's an Amazon certification and they get their, or Network Plus or Security Plus or CYSA, or taking AI courses to complement both of those, look at those as positives, just like I would any extracurricular things that you can do that show initiative tend to translate well in the workplace, because what we're looking for in candidates, not only somebody that as you're coming in more junior level, you're in the right type of place to learn a lot of different things. That's what's exciting about a smaller company. You get exposed to a lot more. But we're looking for that initiative that you get your work done and you're like, what else can I do? From a resume building standpoint, if you're early stage looking to get into the technology space, I'm not saying it's always going to be the only thing, but it's absolutely a big point of consideration when you think about how much experience you really have besides your degree. Probably not a lot, maybe some of the jobs you've done, but what you can do is you can take that initiative to get lots of certifications to show that you have the desire, the will, the grit to do above and beyond what, most people are doing. And I think that carries over. When the market's tough, it's still hard, right? I'm not saying it's an easy space to break into, but that definitely stands out to me. As you progress in your career, from a cyber standpoint, the CISSP, the CISA, those are foundational things that you should just have. We've built our business focused around the infrastructure providers or hyperscalers like AWS, Microsoft, Google Cloud Platform, IBM, Oracle. So it's focusing on those hyperscalers. They've got an enormous amount of training, and in many cases it's free or very nominal. Those are great things to get certified up. And the reason why it's relevant is that's where a lot of cloud and AI is rolled out at scale. So if you understand the nuts and bolts of how technology is created and where it starts from, it really provides a lot of opportunities for you to grow in your career. The more senior you are, the more, not only have you been certified in the different areas, but you've also had that hands-on experience. In the space we're in, we do a lot of governance, risk, compliance. So a lot of the certifications around ISO, SOC, FedRAMP, there's a lot of certs that you can get to show credentialing within the career set that you're pursuing. OJT is great, is paired really well with certs, but initiative, hiring smart people with initiative goes a really long way. So if you're showing that you've got the initiative, that carries not only to get in the door, but also to elevate within the organization.
Thanks, James. I think the pace that we're all experiencing change at these days is just so much faster than it used to be. So I think that ability to be proactive, learn new things and be adaptable, I just think that's going to become more and more paramount as time goes on. Just things seem to be moving at a lightning pace these days.
Yeah, it really does. In many cases, you feel drowned out by volume. And I've got so many things I have to do, and it can actually cripple you because you think you have to do everything and you can't. So I would say that in the world that we live in, really try to focus on a few things and do them really well. Be the expert, right? For the level that you're at, know a little bit more, put a little more time in than most people. It doesn't take long before you start standing out among the candidates out there. So I think it's really important to specialize while you're learning. You don't want to be siloed into one thing. I think it's great to do a lot of different types of roles within technology. But as you elevate up, specializing in domains is important to elevate opportunity for yourself.
And you're right as well. It is easy to stand out because so many people will listen and not do anything. So if you push that bit harder and go above and beyond and maybe do some stuff outside of work. Like so many people won't straight away. You're probably in the top 5-10% just for going above and beyond.
Could be 30 minutes a day.
Yeah, I know.
Consistent. It's amazing how far you can go with just making little tweaks in your routine. It's that discipline. And it's a personal struggle. Believe me, I'm not great at it. It's a constant work in progress, but Atomic Habits, if anybody's read the book, there's some really good principles around making subtle changes that really do provide a force multiplier for you as an individual and a contributor and a leader. It's amazing what a little bit of discipline can change the course of how you operate.
Yeah, I think it can. Just the compound effect of doing a little bit each day. Use the word consistency, and then people just look around, and you know how quick time goes. 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years soon passes, and all of a sudden you've probably got pretty good at something.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. We can't do a podcast without talking about AI, so I'm going to ask you about AI and what you think's going on. And we're having conversations about it internally within our agency now. We've been like on and off phone calls all day. But yeah, what's going on with AI, James, in your world? What's your thoughts on it all?
Yeah, that's that technology disruption that I was talking about earlier. AI is permeating into all facets of the world today, especially the business world. As security professionals, you have to be grounded in proper use of AI and putting the right guardrails, having policy on acceptable use. There's a lot of use cases that I look at from an organizational standpoint of how can we leverage AI for us internally, but also from a platform perspective, we're constantly looking at it. One of the things that I think is a little scary is there's not a lot of guardrails around AI right now, and the adoption is happening so quick. Given the fact that we do a lot of penetration testing on the offensive side and the compliance-based side, we're finding a lot of issues really quickly because people are not implementing AI with the proper guardrails. So I would say that discovery and personal interest, everybody should be involved in trying to learn what's out there. But from a company level, you have to be very careful about making sure you have a good policy for implementation and very closely define the use cases as you look to expand or evolve. And coming from RSA this past week, if you didn't say AI in your offering, you were dead on arrival. You have to say it. Don't let marketing and hype blow too much smoke on the reality that there's a lot of maturity. The maturity of AI is really needed right now because it gets in the wrong hands. There's some massive implications that can be done very quickly with unskilled labor, which is your attack surface from a cyber standpoint explodes on people that can leverage it with very little skill set. So you got to fortify, and certainly it's evolving. I don't know how else to explain it, where from an ISO perspective, there's AI certifications that are a good foundational element that you can look to prepare your organization to go through. You know, NIST has some publications on that as well. You really need to ground it in some sort of framework and start digging into acceptable use before you start rolling it out at scale.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that at RSA it was everywhere. I've heard stories of various customers just saying that they just, I think sometimes people just not even 100% sure what they want, but they just want AI, or they just want it in the phrase because they just got a bit of FOMO or whatever it might be. There's undoubtedly a lot going on with it. I was watching some stuff on pen testing and red team with ChatGPT, and they've tried to, like you use the word guardrails, they've tried to put some guardrails in, but they just look so easy to bypass from what I've been seeing on YouTube. It looked ridiculously basically not very secure.
Yeah, I expect the security space to be, we have to be the most aggressive to understand, but probably the slowest to adopt to balance the business out. Because the business is always going to be far greater than you should be doing in a secure manner. You always have to, as a practitioner, you have to balance both sides. It can't all be, we can't do this because it's too risky. We have to find practical, safe ways, put the guardrails in place so we can leverage the technology and allow the business to move forward at a pace. Then maybe it's certainly not, it's not quicker than what the sales and marketing team wants, but at an acceptable pace that protects your end customers and the company.
Mm. Yeah, definitely, especially with something like AI where everyone is in a mad race to be an optimal level the quickest. So pace is probably significant all the time, but maybe even more so under this circumstance.
This isn't going away anytime soon. I don't think this is a fad. This is definitely AI is here, and how you leverage it and how you govern the business is critical. I feel like there's been a lot of hype tech over the years. This is not one of them.
Yeah, you're not the first technical person I've heard say that, James. And I'm pretty technical for a recruiter. I'm not like on your level or anything like that. And it is kind of nice for me to hear you say that because I see it everywhere. Everyone's talking about it. But then you start looking into it and I'm like, this is really cool. I've heard a few other of my clients that are also leaders and founders say basically what you've just said. So it is nice to get that reassurance that it is really worth diving in headfirst and really going to town on it because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and I think you have to start small. You've got to watch out for shadow IT within the organization, but start with some generative AI use cases and put the right guardrails around it and grow from there. Don't just do a carte blanche, blank approval, and just let people learn and then come back and, oh, we're going to innovate with all this stuff. You've already broken the system. So I think if the right way, you have to be sampling at this point. If you're not, you're getting left behind.
Cool.
And especially in our space.
Yeah, definitely. Security's always moves fast anyway, and now it's just, like you said, you use that word passion at the start of the conversation. If you're in it just for the money and you're not genuinely passionate with the pace it's moving at now, you're probably going to get bored or left behind pretty quickly. So you certainly need to be excited. And I think for those that are, there's probably a lot of opportunity right now.
Yeah. And I'll give you a good example with our labs team. These are hired guns, right? They hack for a living. And the first indicators of somebody that has passion is it's not just a job, it's a lifestyle. So it's like, what kind of lab do you have and what do you do in your spare time?
Yeah.
The best ones are the ones that make it a lifestyle. It's not a hard requirement to work here for that, but it's certainly, we like to hire the best. It's like anything in life, whether it's professional or personal, business, sports, the people that have the passion are typically the ones that rise to the top. So that's why they're as good as they are. It's not just a 9-to-5 job and they go home and do something else. A lot of them do it well above the normal work hours and it's fun to them, right?
Yeah.
They love breaking things. Getting paid to do it in the right context is fantastic.
Yeah. Do you know what? I really see that on the pen testing or the red team or the offensive or the hacking side. I'm in Dubai at the minute and the amount of hackers, when I'm having conversations with them, I can just ring them at 9, 10 in the morning while I'm here because they're up at 3, 4 in the morning in their home labs. They can't sleep because they're hacking. So even on the other side of the world, talking to people in the US all the time, on the offensive security side, certainly, maybe not in other sections of security so much, but certainly on the offensive side, it actually works quite well.
Now, I don't know if I always see that translate on the compliance side. Man, I love reading those 500-page regulations, but people are doing more than what's expected, and that's the individuals that typically, they figure out a way to make it fun.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. As we come to the end, I know you mentioned Atomic Habits, but a question I always like to ask is, it could be a book, it could be content you're consuming online. It doesn't have to be security related, although it can be, but just anything that you're consuming content-wise, books, podcasts, online content that's making you a better version of yourself that could help the listeners. If you got anything we should be aware of in addition to Atomic Habits?
I've got quite a few books. Given that I'm an entrepreneur, I think a really good book, I actually have it here with me right now, it's called Traction, Getting a Grip on Your Business by Gino Wickman. When you look at growing a business, there's a lot to it, right? And just because you're good at one thing doesn't mean that it's going to translate across the company. So I think understanding what it takes to scale a business and the different facets of it, that's a fantastic book. I would encourage the entrepreneurs out there to get involved with a peer group. And what's interesting about the peer group I'm in, I'm with Vistage, but we're 16 individuals and we get to share stories on a monthly basis. And I have an executive coach as well. And I learn a significant amount from that. Of course, what happens in our monthly meetings, it's like Fight Club. It doesn't leave those meetings. It's a safe place to talk. What I learned though is that even though you can't be competitive to be a member of the 16-person team and have a bunch of these all over the country, in order to be a member of that group, you can't have a competitive business.
Okay.
If we were both cyber companies that did the same thing, they would never pair us together because we couldn't speak openly about some of the challenges, sales, finance, legal, whatever. We talked about everything in those types of conversations. But I think it's really important to find a peer group to learn from each other. And what was interesting is I've got partners that are construction owners, GovCon, technology companies, management consulting, manufacturers, just very different businesses. But what's interesting is we all have a common connection. A lot of the business challenges, finance, legal, HR, growth, we all have a lot of things in common, even though we do different stuff. I would say that, from an entrepreneur standpoint, the faster you can find a peer group, I think it's important to learn from each other. And as you grow, in some cases, you feel like you have less people to talk to, right? But I think it's important that you find that outlet to learn from and also contribute to. My personal philosophy is always to give first. So I'm trying to help out as much as I can, sharing my experiences with others, and it runs 360. Those are some general recommendations for me if you're on the entrepreneur side. But never stop reading lifetime students here, especially in the spring.
Yeah, definitely, my friend. We'll get Traction and Atomic Habits in the show notes. I've read Traction and a little bit of Atomic Habits, but I need to finish that off at some point. Maybe I need to get an audio book while I'm walking around or in the gym or something.
Yeah, and it's one of those books that you almost have to read multiple times.
Okay.
Because you'll read it and then you'll forget a lot, and there'll be some things that jump out. You read it again, and you pick up little things here and there. And the key part to it is just trying to take some of that and practice it to build that discipline. Being aware from a broader business view, if you haven't been through this before, there's a lot of things you can learn from those types of books. I just touched the surface there, but those are two that I definitely recommend.
Yeah, cool. All right, James. Well, thank you for your time, my friend. Do you think we'll nail the episode, mate? Do you think we did a good job?
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
I
All right,
appreciate the show.
It's been nice to catch you up. Thanks again for your time, mate. It's been nice to see you, James. It's been good.
Thank you.